Hi, welcome to the M2M Project. This is Sebastian MacLean. Remember to like and subscribe. Today, we are talking to a good friend of mine, Hyan Thiboutot. He's been an amazing help with the stuff that I've been doing in scripts over the years. I can't even really remember how we first met, so I'm going to kind of dig into that with him. But first of all, I'm going to introduce you to Hyan Thiboutot. Hyan, welcome to the show, and looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the background.
Thank you very much for having me. And I do remember how we got in touch. You got in touch through LinkedIn. The only person ever to have gotten in touch with me on LinkedIn was you. And you became a friend over the years, which has been pretty amazing. I can't remember why you got in touch, but it had something to do with screenwriting and putting projects together. I think at the time you were putting a slate of 5 projects together with Zoltan, if I could say that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Zoltan and Jatin, a couple of producer guys that I had met down in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
We met up here in Toronto after that, and we started talking about the idea of putting together a slate of moderate to low budget projects,
Yeah.
and we were looking for scripts for that kind of fit that mold. And yeah, so now that you mention it, I remember that was sort of the starting point. There's a lot of complexities involved, as you know, with doing a slate. So we were kind of fishing around with different producers in Toronto as well that were maybe had some strong contacts. And yeah, I guess in that process, you and I, because I was in the middle of starting to kind of engage with something that was Red Rock.
Yeah.
Was that and we made that a sidebar conversation, I guess. And then you wound up script doctoring the first episode of Red Rock on the
It,
pilot.
it always it always gets messy that way, doesn't it? You have an idea and you say, you know what, I've got something else there. And actually, I've been thinking about this other thing. I've got a bit of an outline hanging around on the background. Do you mind having a look at that? And then it gets incredibly messy and just you end up with having 10 projects that partially are being developed in all directions, which for me is actually a really, really good thing. You either have these screenwriters and producer teams that will concentrate really, really hard on the one project and put everything into it and push it. And when that doesn't come through, there's just such a mourning period at the other end of that, right? You just want to go like, fuck it, I'll leave the industry. I will never do this again because it's too hard. It is really hard. But if you have 2 or 3 other projects on the sidelines in various kind of stages of development that you can push, one that you can push and have ready within a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and one that you know that's going to take much longer. That's a good position to be in because it fills you with a lot of confidence that you can just blast another one out if you need to.
Yeah.
But I meant to ask you, when you were what's one of the challenges that you had to face when putting together a slate of scripts like that? Was it going out and finding writers who already had projects that would fit the bill, or did you have a series of ideas that you then went to find a writer that would be able to execute that, for instance?
I think, I mean, the initial approach, at least with that package that we were doing at the time, was just to find scripts. We were trying to keep our hands off of, engaging in the writing process because we wanted to kind of move things forward quickly. So we thought, well, we'll look for, uh, sub $1 million kind of picture
Yeah.
projects, things that we could do on a mini to micro budget scale. The big challenge though was sifting through garbage.
Well,
And present company excluded, but when we started putting it out there, we started getting hammered with all kinds of all kinds of scripts. But some of them, didn't understand anything about story structure or formatting, or some of the
excuse me.
ideas were just, you get into about 10 pages, you're just trying to find ways to weed through and find something that's magic.
Well, I was about to say that. How do you know when you have a good script? Because you could read through, and you see it in some movies, and you see it in some series on Netflix. You're like the first act or the first sequence, first 10, 15 minutes. You're going, man, this kind of blows. This is really slow.
Yeah, yeah.
And then suddenly it just picks up and it goes a little bit nuts, and then you're totally involved, right? And if you were to do not the Robert McKee, but the Sid Field thing of saying, I only read for 10 pages and chuck, you might be passing out on a lot of gems.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I agree.
how do you know when you've got something on the page? How do
I,
you know?
well, for me, and I'm sure it's different for a lot of people, but my way of thinking of it is just that I love a good concept. So if the
Yeah,
concept, that log line or that synopsis, really sells me, I'm more motivated to kind of go into maybe page 20 and dig in deeper and maybe even skip over to the middle and the end and kind of look for the gem in that idea that I saw when I read the synopsis.
yeah.
And then sometimes it's because of maybe a production partner likes an idea. It's not particularly your concept, but you'll give it a bit more of a read to try and figure out if you can even find it palatable to participate because they
So
like it.
what? So what do you do? Sorry to interrupt. What do you do when you find a script where the writer clearly is really good, and you can tell, right? You can tell within 5 words, and you go, "This all right," and then within a page, you're like, "This is really interesting," but the concept's not there and the idea is not there. But clearly, you've got a really good writer there, or you've got a shitty writer, but it's a really really good concept, but it's not well executed. How do you know? How do you know how to deal with those situations? And how much time do you allocate to a bad script before you go, you know what, this is not redeemable?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of different layers to that because there's like ego play as well. But without naming scripts and names and so on, I know there was one that was a potential idea. What I was looking for was something that was sort of set in the wilderness, um, where you could shoot with almost one person for the whole thing.
Mm,
And so I found something, and someone thinks he's maybe hunting or not hunting, he's being tracked by some strange creature in the woods, but there's a lot of kind of, alluding to something maybe, but you're not totally sure if it's in his mind or I was, and I found something that was kind of in that vein, but it wasn't well executed.
yeah, yeah.
Just to fill space, the guy was going on speeches at campfires like every 5 minutes, and every time there was
As you do, right?
right, yeah, and so I thought, well, this has to be kind of patched up. So I started to, but again, I was really sold on the concept of trying to develop something like this. Um, so I offered to kind of do a reworking, and what wound up being the kind of killer on that one was that ultimately it was so bad. I tried to go through it and chop things out, and it was like 75% of it, 80% of it I wound up chopping out. And,
That's a
and
lot.
then and then it wound up becoming kind of an ego issue for the writer. And I realized, you know what, I should just step away because really I'd be better off to write something from scratch myself than try and kind of patch that in. I think if the guy had been much more kind of flexible about that, realizing
Sure.
maybe that, then it may have been a different story. I mean, I would have put in a ton of work myself, and it would have become a
Yeah,
co-writing kind of
yeah.
situation. But yeah,
This is one of the challenges I found with producers quite a lot. Is that they would come up to you with an idea X, right, logline, and then you would execute it, and then they would say, "Oh, does it need to be in space, and does it need to be about family, and can we not do this and do that and do that?" And suddenly it becomes something completely different. Even a book adaptation or remake of a movie, they've
mhm.
changed it so much. They said, "Well, this is not a remake anymore. This is not an adaptation. This is a unique thing. Why not just go with the unique idea and just push that on instead of calling it something else?" And it's this weird psychology of the book is known and therefore it's going to make a lot of money. And I said, no, the product shit. Nobody's going to. It's going to tank your career. And so trying to work ideas through with producers is incredibly difficult because you're taking something really abstract and then begin to mold it together. And some producers will get incredibly impatient. Some producers, to be honest, that don't know the craft of storytelling. They just know that there's a poster and they know how to market, and what they do incredibly well. But that side of development, not so much. So when a producer comes to me with the right questions, and the right approach and the flexibility of approach. They say, I'd love to have something that's kind of like The Conjuring, but set in Louisiana and the bayous, for instance. And you go, okay, I'll put something together. I'll start shaping that together, and he or she will come in and say, well, you know what, that third sequence kind of doesn't work because of this, because of that, or the character backstory is not believable in terms of creating a flaw or a character or belief system for the character, and therefore can we go in this direction or that direction? And they kind of steer you along. So they're not precious about the wallpaper. They're looking at the big picture and they just kind of guide you on really nicely. And I love when that happens because now you know that you're working with it with a good producer and somebody who will helm you through it, but also will kind of protect you through throughout the process. And this is good when somebody in the early stages is going, I think the window should be on the left, and you're like, fuck me. We're at the outlining stage here, and we've got another 1,000 decisions to go through before we even begin to think about this stuff. And you're all worried about this stuff, not in terms of being hyper vigilant about the process, but because you don't understand what it takes for us to get to this point, and that's exhausting.